Welcome to Coronavirus Impact. I'm Kess Baker. Our first guest today is Angela Couloumbis, investigative reporter with the Spotlight PA, and she's joining us over the phone. Angela, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, how many cases of coronavirus are we seeing here in Pennsylvania?
Well, as of yesterday, which was the latest update from the Department of Health, although we expect one pretty soon here, we had nearly 650 cases and 6 deaths. And of those, 7 counties, which are now in kind of a state of lockdown, had about 75% of the cases. So majority of the cases still seem to be clustered in very specific areas of the state.
Now, can you talk a little bit about that 7-county shutdown and what Governor Wolf's order was about that?
So yesterday, the governor basically imposed a stay-at-home order on these 7 counties, and they include Philadelphia and the surrounding counties. So that would be Bucks, Montgomery, Chester, and Delaware, and then also Allegheny County in the west and Monroe County up in the northeast. He imposed a stay-at-home order there on residents. So what that means is don't leave your house unless you have to get very essential things like medication or go see your doctor or you need to get groceries. He did clarify a little bit later in the day, and he said that residents can leave their homes to, say, take the dog out or take a walk or take a hike. But again, he's been very clear that if you do that, practice social distancing and try and do it by yourself or with a very, very small group of individuals that are your family members that you've been around pretty much the entire time that we have been going through this surge in cases.
Do we know how long this order is going to be in effect in these 7 counties?
So right now, that order is for 2 weeks, but as you probably already know, he has said and has signaled that people should be prepared to remain at home for longer periods unless the surge starts to even out. He keeps talking about all of these preventive measures flattening the curve. And until that happens, until we stop seeing that daily increase in cases, he's pretty much said that these, I don't want to call them draconian because they're not, because people still can move around, but they are very aggressive measures and that they will remain in place until that curve flattens.
So how will businesses in these counties be affected? Will the grocery stores and pharmacies still be open at this point?
Yes. So in a lot of counties, they are still open. Some are operating on reduced hours. And some stores have put in other measures, like only allowing certain number of customers in at one time. But they are open and they are serving people. And businesses are under a separate shutdown order, which was imposed late last week. And that one is indefinite. It basically said as long as you are providing essential life-sustaining services, you can remain open. But if you aren't, you have to close. And there has been kind of a refinement of the list of businesses that fall under that life-sustaining category. Because initially when the order was first imposed, there was a lot of pushback from businesses, particularly from the manufacturing sector, which really felt that it was being hampered from kind of providing essential products that go to other companies that provide life-sustaining services. So that list has been refined, and there is now a waiver process for companies who believe they fall under the shutdown order, but who can at least make the argument to the administration that there's good reason for them to remain open.
So in this revision of this order, which businesses are now able to operate and be open?
So you have, obviously you have the supermarkets, you have the gas stations, you have the pharmacies, but pet stores are among those that can remain open. There were law firms initially were part of the shutdown order. They, under certain circumstances, can also open and operate. Accountants and accounting firms had also fallen under that order, and they're now allowed to operate. So there has been a refinement process. We don't have the latest numbers yet on how many companies have gotten waivers successfully from the administration and where exactly, what industries they may fall in.
Now, you mentioned concerns that the manufacturing industry had about being shut down during this time. What concerns are we seeing from lawyers and accountants and other businesses like that about them being shut down during this time?
Well, I think when you talk about firms that provide services like that, particularly lawyers felt that they would be hampered from providing essential services regarding seeking justice to their clients. And in fact, we saw a lawsuit last week to that effect, which has since been withdrawn because there is now permission for law firms to operate. But in that lawsuit, they were essentially challenging the governor's powers under the Constitution to shut them down because of the types of services they provide.
Let's talk about the governor's powers in this situation. What powers does he have under the Constitution to shut down businesses during a time of a public health crisis?
Well, it's still a matter of debate, but I can tell you that the administration has said very clearly that when it signed its disaster emergency order on March 6th, it basically triggered part of the emergency management law in Pennsylvania that allows him to do a lot of things. I mean, everything from setting evacuation routes to limiting and restricting people's movements, and that in particular is the part that he's using to justify essentially requiring businesses to shut down. It has very specific language talking about controlling ingress and egress to and from a disaster area and the movement of people within that area. So that's the language in particular that he's pointing to that allows him and gives him the power to shut down businesses.
Now, will Governor Wolf be enforcing this shutdown of new businesses? And if so, how is he going to go about doing that?
Yes, so that too has evolved. Enforcement began yesterday evening at 8 p.m. And what he has said is that the state police and other state law enforcement entities will have the power to cite and potentially fine businesses that don't follow the order. I think they're trying, at least initially, to provide warnings first to those businesses so that they, in the case that they didn't quite understand the order or didn't understand that they were subject to the order. But they've also made it very clear that they will fine businesses that don't comply after that.
Now, there may be some viewers who are confused why these businesses are closed. What is the importance of having these businesses shut down at this point in time?
So the whole point is to limit the number of people who gather in one place and to limit their exposure, because Governor Wolf yesterday said the problem with this virus is that it is very elusive. You may have it without knowing it, and as a result, if you are in close contact with other people, which happens in a lot of stores and businesses and in a workplace, then you could be unknowingly spreading it to others. And then those people, in turn, could spread it to others. And it's the fear is this chain reaction that creates so many sicken so many people that the hospital system is overwhelmed and can't treat it.
Now, you've also reported that there have been rising job losses and unemployment compensation in the state. Can you talk a little bit about that and what we're seeing?
Sure. So in the first few days of the shutdown, essentially what we saw was tens of thousands of people filing unemployment claims, and the system kind of being a bit overwhelmed by that because these surges are in unemployment benefits are A, unusual, and B, the Department of Labor and Industry is like other government agencies, only requiring essential employees to come in and actually staff these call centers. So for people who are actually calling in for their unemployment benefits, they're dealing with a reduced staff. And then, so the department has said the best thing for you to do if you need to file for unemployment is to do it online if you have access to a computer and internet, which not everyone does. But to give you a sense of how insane it was that first day of the shutdown, there were 50,000 people who filed for a claim for unemployment benefits, which is, they wouldn't give us specific numbers for how that compares to like a daily rate, but that far surpasses anything that they experience during non-emergency time.
So what has the impact of the coronavirus been on Pennsylvania's workforce?
That is something that's really tough to answer, and I think it's going to take several months to really get a sense of what it means for the economy, what it means for unemployment, what it means for so many of these industries that are so essential to Pennsylvania's economy. But people, I think it's fair to say, based off of the unemployment numbers that we're seeing, that people are losing their jobs in droves as businesses have shut down. The hope is that these businesses will reopen after the crisis kind of subsides, and that these people will be able to seek employment or get reemployed. But it is really difficult to underestimate just how huge the impact is going to be on the economy once this is said and done.
Now, you've also reported that the governor and the legislative leaders have reached an agreement to postpone the 2020 primary. Can you talk a little about that, what they agreed to, and how that's going to happen?
Yes, so the House, as we speak, is in session, and they are working remotely. They have changed their rules to allow most of their members to submit their votes either through an email or a text. And one of the things that they're taking up today is a bill that will be amended on the House floor that will move Pennsylvania's primary from April 28th to June 2nd, and that is because of coronavirus fears. And it also has a couple of other provisions in it, among them allowing election officials to open up mailed-in ballots on the morning of an election, which in turn will hopefully speed things up in counting the vote. So that bill is supposed to come up for second consideration and will be amended on the floor to put that language in. Third and final consideration could happen as early as tomorrow, and the Senate could take it up as early as tomorrow and send it to the governor's desk.
And we will be covering the House session live today at 1 p.m. Angela Couloumbis, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back right after this.
Take a nostalgic look back at some of the best games PCN has televised over the past 20 years with PCN Sports Classics. Watch the entire game without interruption and get updates on key players and coaches who have made Pennsylvania sports history. Watch new episodes monthly and stream the full series on demand with the PCN Select streaming service. Visit PCNTV.com to subscribe. PCN, proud to bring Pennsylvania sports to you.
This week on PA Books.
Hard to top Ben Franklin as far as his importance. What an interesting person he was.
We also had Joseph Hughes, who was a member of the Continental Congress, was the first Secretary of the Navy. He had used his influence, John Paul Jones was his friend, and used his influence to get him a command in the Navy.
Joe Farrell, Joe Farley, and Lawrence Knorr, authors of Pennsylvania Patriots, Sunday at 7 p.m.
Our next guest joining us on the phone is Senator Langerholc of Bedford, Cambria, and Clearfield counties. He's also the Senate Education Committee Majority Chair. Senator Langerholc, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon.
So what have you been hearing from school districts and schools? What are their biggest concerns at this point?
Well, there's a lot of concerns that school districts had, and since all of this really developed, we have been working in close concert with all of the stakeholders that are involved. But there's so much uncertainty in education, as there is so much uncertainty, across the nation dealing with this issue. But there are the main concern that they have is when are they going to be able to resume school as they know it.
And do we know when they're going to be able to resume classes in these buildings?
Well, the Secretary of Education yesterday extended the closure, statewide closure, for an additional, actually, a week and a half. It originally came out that it was 2 weeks, but the plan is, under his proposal, for school administrators and teachers to return April 6th, which would be 2 weeks from yesterday, and then students to return April the 9th is the tentative plan now. But as things develop, obviously, it's a very fluid situation, and we'll continue to monitor it.
So are students taking online classes in the meantime, or are they completely free from classes at this point?
No, that's the issue that we're dealing with now. And there are some school districts across the state that are offering that, but we need to be careful and ensure that all students' needs are being met. And that's one of the big issues that we've been working on with the legislation that is set to be introduced here in the House today in the House Appropriations Committee. And then, assuming everything passes, we'll have it in the Senate tomorrow. It'll come on into the Rules Committee and then to the floor of the Senate for a concurrence vote.
Can you talk a little bit about that legislation and what it's going to accomplish?
Yes, it covers a wide range of issues, and again, issues that we have been dealing with in discussing with the different stakeholders, superintendents, all the different entities that have a stake in the education system. I'll just run through. Mainly, it will it will eliminate the 180-day. It will waive the 180-day instructional day immediately, and then it gives the Secretary of Education the opportunity to do any or all of about 6 different issues. One, to increase the number of flexible instruction days that institutions may have for the 2019-2020 school year, and waive the application deadline. It also gives the Secretary discretion to waive the minimum total number of hours for career and tech ed programs, waive the requirement to include performance data in a professional employee's performance rating, waive the minimum number of days of pre-kindergarten instruction that's required, and waive the 12-week student-teacher requirement for educator preparation programs that they were obviously unable to meet due to this pandemic of 2020. And then also, there are different assessments for career and tech ed students. They're called the NIMS assessment and the NOCTI exam. Those would also be waived, in addition to the PSSAs and the Keystones, which was already done separately. And there are other issues that it deals with as well.
How does the waiving of these assessments affect the students this year and into the upcoming school year?
Well, that's an issue that we're going to have to continue to work on. Waiving that, obviously, you're not going to have students that are going to be taking those exams. So how can we maximize the time that we're going to have here going forward when this does resolve itself and how we can best meet those needs. And again, that'll be part of ongoing discussion, and I would imagine there will be other issues that will develop as a result of this, initial legislation. This initial legislation really is to address the core needs right now of how we deal with school as we know it going forward, and how we can take the best steps to continue to educate our children all across the Commonwealth.
Now, when it comes to educating our children, you said earlier that some of them are receiving classes outside of the classroom, but some may not. How are those students who might not be able to access the internet or access online classes, how are they dealing with this situation?
That's what will be part of the discussion going forward here, and that's a very real issue. And especially, there are school districts that are set up that could start doing this tomorrow. But again, you need to temper that with the fact that there are students that may be in special ed programs or IEPs that are going to need that instruction as well, but they may not be able to even receive it online or virtually. And couple that with the fact, like my district, the 35th district, I represent all of Cambria, Bedford, and Clearfield counties, and there are many school districts within my district that may not even have broadband access, that may not even be able to go online. And there are many students and many families within the 35th district that don't have access to broadband. So how do we address those issues, and how do we ensure that we can get those students to be able to receive the education? And that's something that we've been working on too as well. I've had many different calls with different superintendents across, not just in my district, but across the state, in the eastern and western part of the state. And that is an issue that that they're dealing with as well, and we're trying to work through that with some broadband access, and there are some different bills through that committee.
Now, how are schools and school districts working with the administration as well as the legislature to come up with a solution for how our kids can be educated?
And that's key. I mean, in this pandemic, communication is vital. Communication is key across all disciplines, not just education, but just in getting the information out with respect to the Department of Health and other issues that are, that we're dealing with at this time. So we have been fortunate. We have had all various stakeholders involved in these discussions going forward to get the input, to gather what we need to address in the short term and the long term, and we're working towards that. And again, I would put this out there, put this plug, that if anyone feels or has any information, my door is always open. My phone, my Capital line in my office in Harrisburg, 717-787-5400. If there's any stakeholders out there that have not been a part of the discussion, I open that. I welcome that with open arms to hear, because we really need to hear from everybody. We need to come up with a broad-based approach, and the best way to do that is to have communication from everyone involved so that we know everything that we're dealing with and how we can best address the situation.
Now, we've talked about our students and educating the students here in Pennsylvania. What about the teachers? Is there any legislation discussions in place to help support the educators of our students?
Yes, there is. One main thing that we're extending is the requirement for any kind of continuing education. That obviously, they're not going to be able to meet those deadlines, so that will be extended out.
Senator Blaine Langerholc, thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much. Have a good day. Stay safe.
And that's all the time we have for Coronavirus Impact. Check our website at pcntv.com for air dates and times. You can also find episodes on our Facebook page and on our YouTube channel. I'm Kes Baker. Thank you for watching.